We're on Daf Yomi Aleph. We're going to finish the first parak today. And we were in the middle of talking about this halacha having to do with coordinating with an akum to have him work on your field. There's a prohibition to have him work on your field, even if you lease him the field, if he's going to work on Shabbos. The last thing that we saw was the Shita of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and he says that as long as the non-Jew will comply with your request not to work the field on Shabbos, you're allowed to lease the field to him. And that was the difference he felt between a kusi and an akum. The akum will listen to you, the kusi won't listen to you because he feels he knows as much about Judaism as you do. So if you tell him, please don't work on Chol HaMoed, because it's a holy period, he's going to say, Chol HaMoed is nothing, I'm not going to listen to him. So that's why we said that according to that last brisa, you can't lease to a kusi, even though you could lease to an akum. And this really leads to the whole question of partnership with a Gentile vis-a-vis Hilchas Shabbos. And we touched on it a little bit yesterday, saying that there's a lot of halacha l'maisa that we don't really have time to go into. But it's about the 8th line on Daf Yomi Aleph. Hanahu morikai da'ove kochavim nakit b'shabta v'yisrael b'chad b'shabta. So there was two people, one was a Jew, one was an akum, and they were in partnership. They had a business where they would rent property from a person, and then they would grow saffron. Saffron is a very, very valuable commodity. It takes a lot of, it's very labor intensive, but you don't need a huge amount, and you can make a lot of money off of saffron. So the deal that they arranged between the two of them is that the Jew will work on Sunday and the Gentile will work on Saturday. And then, the rest of the week they'll make up. So asu lakami derava sharalahu. And they wanted to know whether this was a legitimate partnership, if it was halachically permitted. Sure. And Rava said, Paskin, sure, it's fine. So Eisvei Ravina l'Rava. So Ravina challenges this to Rava. And he says, Yisrael v'obe kochavim shekiblu sada b'shutvus, lo yomar Yisrael la'obe kochavim tul chelkecha b'shabes v'ani b'chol. He says there's a problem. The Brisa says that if a Jew and an akum accept to work on a field in partnership, it is not legal for the Yisrael to say to the akum, I'll work on Sunday, you work on Saturday. The reason is because since we are equal partners in this field in its entirety, it turns out that we're exchanging. You're acting as my proxy to work on Saturday. I'm acting as your proxy to work on Sunday. And it turns out that I'm benefiting directly from the work that you do for me on Shabbos. And this is, you're not allowed to have an akum do work, a non-Jew do work for you on Shabbos. It's forbidden. So the question is, how, Rava, can you permit these two guys to go into partnership if the Gentile is going to be working for the Jew on Shabbos? But then the Brisa says, V'im hisnu mitchila mutar. If, however, before they take possession of a property, they incorporate their business such that the Gentile is only working for himself on Saturday, because the deal is that whatever future properties we take, you will be the owner on Saturday and I will be the owner on Sunday, then it's permitted. Because then when they take possession of the property, initially the Gentile is taking ownership for the Saturday portions, and the Jew is taking ownership for the Sunday portion, so there's no exchange being made at the time of work. So it all depends when the stipulation is made. If the stipulation is made after they take possession, after their corporation takes possession of the property, so then it's not permitted, because the division of responsibility is not a division of the partnership. But if they divide responsibilities before taking possession of the property, so then it's legal, because at that point, at the time of taking possession, the Gentile owns the property for all of Shabbos, and the Jew owns the property for all of Sunday. So they're not working for each other, they're working only for themselves. That's the distinction in the Brisa. V'imbo l'cheshbon aser. Now a third halach, that if after having worked by themselves, in other words, when in this third case is where no stipulation is made, they take possession of a property, there's no stipulation made, you work on Saturday, I'll work on Sunday, but they just start working that way out of habit. And then after the fact, the Jew comes to the Gentile and says, I notice you've been working on Saturday. How many Saturdays have you put in? Because that way I owe you an equal number of Sundays that I have to work. So if you do that, even if it's after the fact, it's prohibited, because then you're reflecting on the fact that there was a quid pro quo and you were working for each other. You're exchanging with each other. So the bottom line is, Ravina says to Rava, working under the assumption that when they took possession of the property, they hadn't yet divided the assignment of labor, then it should be usher what they're doing. Why did you tell them that it's mutter? So the Gemara says, ichsif. Rava was embarrassed because it seems like Ravina caught him. L'sofi gloi milsa dehisnu meikara havu. So, but then it turned out that Rava was vindicated, because even though he didn't know it at the time, but they had actually created their corporation before they took possession of the property, and they had already created a division of responsibility and a division of ownership for all future property they would acquire. And then it turns out that it was okay, so Rava, thank God, was saved from that embarrassment. Now, that's all a story according to the way the Gemara presents it, but Rav Geviha mi Beikasil Amar, Rav Geviha is apparently arguing with whoever's recording this Gemara. And he's saying, you got the story all wrong. That's not what Rava's case was. The Jew and the Gentile who came before Rava were not dealing with a malacha on Shabbos question. They were dealing with Hanu Shesile Do'or Lahava, Ovikochavim Achol Shnei Do'or Lav Yisrael Shnei Het Teira, Asu Lakami De Rava Sharalahu. The case was, there was a division of labor, but not based on Saturday and Sunday, but based on they took possession of an orchard, and they were planting trees. Smart. And the shaila was, how are they going to divide responsibilities of cultivation of the trees? The Gentile took the first 3 years and ate the produce from those first 3 years, and the Jew took the second 3 years and ate the produce from the second 3 years of the tree's growth. And the reason why they did it that way, obviously, is because a Jew is commanded not to eat orla produce for the first 3 years. And like Rashi explains, there's absolutely no problem, because even if they created the division of labor after they took possession of the orchard, there's nothing wrong with my benefiting from your work during Orla. And it's not that you're eating the produce because I'm sharing with you the produce that belongs to me. The convention is that whoever works the orchard owns the produce. So you work your time, and granted we have a corporation and I'm benefiting from that work, but there's nothing wrong from benefiting from the cultivation of an orchard that is Orla. It's just prohibited to benefit from the produce itself, and I'm not benefiting from the produce itself.
Wow. Why didn't you give him through the 4th year at the Rabbi myself? It could have well at that point.
It could have been, but so what? So you just do a pigeon on money.
Right,
it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you got on Orla. That's smart.
Yeah. So this is how and therefore don't say that Rava wasn't presented with a Hilchas Shabbos Shaila. He was presented with a Hilchas Orla Shaila. That was what he was presented with, and that's why he was moderate. So don't tell me that he initially made a mistake and wasn't careful. So wait a minute. V'ha osvei Ravina l'Rava. But 1 second, according to your version of the story, then what was Ravina bringing him brisa that has to do with Hilchas Shabbos if the case had nothing to do with Hilchas Shabbos? The Gemara says, L'siyuye saya'e. The Gemara says he was coming to support him, because what does that brisa say? The brisa says that as long as they created the corporation initially, before taking possession of the orchard, even vis-a-vis Hilchas Shabbos, it's okay. So therefore, as long as you're not doing anything, the Gentile is not doing anything that would be prohibited for me to do on my behalf, it's perfectly okay. And therefore, certainly if it's in Hilchas Shabbos it's okay, then certainly in Hilchas Orla it's okay. But wait a minute, Vaha Ichsif, but isn't the story that we just quoted that Rava was embarrassed because he thought he botched it? Lo hayudvar me'olam. That's not part of the story. That never happened, according to this other late Amora, Rav Geviha. Now, Ibayalahu stamamai. So now the question is, we've addressed a lot of different cases. What happens if the Jew and the Gentile have a partnership, they never stipulate at the outset or after the fact whether or not the Gentile is going to work on Saturday and the Jew is going to work on Sunday. But it's implied. and they say nothing to each other, and the Gentile does all the work on Saturday, and the Jew does all the work on Sunday. Is that okay vis-a-vis Hilchas Shabbos? So, Tashma, im hisnu mitchila mutter, hastama aser. So the Gemara says, well, the Brisa had stated that only if they initially, before taking possession of the property, make that stipulation in their partnership, is it okay? Which is mashma that if they don't make that stipulation explicitly, then it's not okay. But wait a minute, ema seifa. But then take a look at the second part of that brisa. Im bo lecheshbon aser hastama mutter. It's only if there was an explication after the fact, after they started working, that the Jew says, how many Saturdays do you take? I'll take an equal number of Sundays. Do we say that it's aser? But it's mashma from the seifa that if they say nothing, it's okay. So the reisha sounds like it's not okay. The seifa sounds like it is okay. Ela meha leka lemishma mina. So therefore you can't infer either from this brisa. The brisa does not imply what would be if they say nothing. And that question, therefore, is left unanswered. Hadron alach lifnei eidehen. Let's go on and start the next Mishnah. I'm sure you were so interested and fascinated by our discussion a few days ago about Gentile bestiality. So because we were so fascinated by it, it's backed by popular demand in the second parak. So this is what the topic of the second parak is, about letting your animals graze under the tutelage of an akum. So the Mishnah says, and we've seen this before, Ein ma'amidim behema b'pundako shel ovdei kochavim v'nei shechashudim al harevia, that you're not allowed to have a Jew's animals graze or stay in the Gentile market, in the akum market, because they're suspect of committing acts of bestiality with the animal. And even though you don't care, you might not even care, but there's an isser of lifnei iver. You're not allowed to cause your property to cause a non-Jew to sin. Now, Tosfos makes a very interesting point at the very bottom here. He says, I don't understand. Maisim b'chol yom, in the medieval world, all farmers, Jewish farmers, give their livestock over to Gentile shepherds to watch. And even if you consider them to be ovdei ovados kochavim, we don't have such concerns. We don't have such suspicions. So how come we're permitted to do it if the Mishnah said it's forbidden? So Tosfos says, we're going to see on tomorrow's daf that there's actually a machlokes, and Rabbi Pedas will be of the opinion, explaining the shita of, he says, this Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Eliezer, and according to the Chachamim, you are allowed to give your animals over to an akum. And the Rabbi Pedas explains, because they're not suspect. In other words, there may have been one time in biblical history where there was such a suspicion, but nowadays that's not a concern anymore. So Tosfos says, we don't paskin like this Mishnah. I just want you to keep that in mind. Any discussion that we have about akum bestiality is not halacha l'maisa. Okay? So now let us go on.
Bestiality, one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai.
It is. It's under the rubric of Gili Arayos. Gili Arayos is one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai. It's the whole gamut, right? Next, a Jewish woman may not seclude herself with an akum because they're suspect of committing sexual crimes. And furthermore, even a Jewish male may not have yichud with an akum, because even if you can protect yourself from sexual advances, but they're suspected from a murder, and you could putting your life in danger. Let's go on. Or a mini. So now let's raise a contradiction to the first part of the Mishnah, which talked about the prohibition of giving your livestock to be watched by an akum. It says, Lochin mehen behema lekorban vein choshishin lo mishum roveya velo mishum nirva velo mishum muktzah velo mishum nevad. So it's important to understand this brisa, that a person who wishes to purchase an animal for a korban is allowed to purchase the animal from an akum. Now, there are certain things that disqualify an animal from being used as a korban. If it was used for bestiality, either as the male or the female in the partnership, the animal cannot be brought as a korban. If the animal was designated for avodah zara or was worshipped as an idolatry in itself, it also can't be used as a korban. But the Brisa says, we're not worried about that. You can assume that when you purchase a sheep or a goat from an akum, the animal is free from any of those stigmata. So the question now is, how can that be permitted if there's an automatic suspicion that they commit acts of bestiality? So bishlam muktzah v'nevar imisa da aktsiye v'imisa da palki lo havamazbin lei ela roveya v'nir v'leichush. I can understand why you don't have to worry that the animal was in any way used for idolatry, because if it was, a Gentile would hold that animal to be precious and would not relinquish it, wouldn't sell it. But why aren't you worried that the animal was used for some sexual crime? So Amar of Tachlifa, Amar of Shila bar Avina, Mishmei Derav, Obe kolchavim chas al behemto shelo te'aker. We saw this answer before, that an akum is concerned when it comes to his own property. He's not gonna violate his own property because it'll cause the animal to become sterile.
But if he sells it, what does he care?
Because he's going to lose money. He's got to,
because the guy's not going to know.
No, but beforehand, before he sells it.
The buyer's not going to know that
the argument. So the buyer will know. He'll say your animal. They'll get a doctor to look at the animal.
Oh.
The animal will be injured. Will have internal damage, and the guy will say, "I'm not going to buy this animal." And if he buys it, he'll demand his money back because it was misrepresentation. So the Gemara now says, "Hatenach." We'll get a lawyer involved. Hatenach nekevo zechorim ma'ika l'meimar. So the Gemara says that's all well and good if you're selling a female animal. But what about if you want to buy a male animal? A male animal could be mounted by a committer of bestiality and will not be sterilized as a result. So, and also if the animal mounts mounts a woman, also the animal is not going to be sterilized as a result. So what's the problem? I mean, why are you allowed to buy a male animal? I can understand you can buy a female animal because they're not going to criminalize the animal. But what about a male animal? So the Gemara answers, Amar of Kahana hol u'machishin bebasar. The answer is that these kinds of activities, even for males, decrease muscle tissue in the animal, decrease the animal's strength. And therefore, so too, the seller is not going to want to sell it because the guy's going to see the animal. It's weak, it's limping, whatever. He's not going to want to buy it. So, Elahad Tanya Lokhin Behema Meroa Shalahen Leichosh Dilma Rava La Roa Shalahen. So the Gemara says, or maybe Dilma Ravala, comma. So the Gemara says, but 1 second, there's also a brisa that says that you're even allowed to purchase an animal not only from an akum owner of the livestock, but even from an akum overseer, whatever you call that guy, a shepherd, whatever you call him. He's in charge of watching flocks that belong to other people. Now, he doesn't care if the animal depreciates in value. He's not making, he's still getting his hourly wage. So why aren't you worried that maybe he'll commit acts of bestiality with the sheep? So the Gemara answers, Roa shalahen misyare mishum hefsid schar. Because he's worried that he'll lose money. He'll lose his job. Exactly, because if they find out that he's been playing with the flock, they're going to fire him. So Elahad Tanya, Ein Mosrin Behema Laroa Shalahen, Lema Roa Shalahen Misari Mishum Hefsid Scharo. So the Gemara says, well, then why is there another brisa that paskins that a Jew is not allowed to submit his flock to an akum shepherd? If he's worried about losing his job, then why can't we submit our animals to him? So the Gemara answer is Inhu diadi bahadadi mirasasi, anandalo yadinin behulo mirasasi. So the Gemara gives a very interesting answer. There's the akum shepherd is more fearful of akum sheep owners than he is from Jewish sheep owners. You know why? So Rashi explains it in one of two ways. One explanation is because the akum are going to be hanging around him more because they're, birds of a feather flock together. And the other explanation is that since they also like committing acts of bestiality and are familiar with what their animals look like after they've been violated, they'll be able to detect much more easily if their livestock has been violated. A Jew doesn't know from such things. So a Jew is not going to be as suspecting, and the goy knows that, and therefore he's not going to be as fearful. So Amar Rabba, Hainu da Amri Inshi, Machteva Gilala Baza, Ragla B'chavre Yoda. So that's the phrase that people say. It basically boils down to birds of a feather flock together. But the way it goes is like this. A machtev is a stylus, an iron stylus that can carve even marble. And so the marble rock is scared of the stylus because it knows what it's capable of doing. So too, ragla b'chavre yada, that one merchant knows the cunning and the threat of another merchant. In other words, since we know what each other are capable of doing, that's why we're scared of each other. And that's why the Akum shepherd is more scared of the Akum owner than he is of the Jewish owner. So the Gemara now says, okay, so you've explained why it's okay to buy a Gentile-owned animal from a Gentile, because we're not worried that he's going to mount the animal and damage the merchandise. But why aren't we worried? That should be to say why you can't buy from a Gentile male. But what about purchasing from an Akum female? Now, the only thing that she would potentially use the animals for is to mount her. The animal is not, we shouldn't be allowed to buy because Dilma Marava Alei Luva. Maybe she'll cause the animal to mount her. And it's only that you're only weakening the animal by mounting the animal. Right. But allowing the animal to mount a woman is not going to cause the animal to be... He won't get damaged. No. So why is it permitted to buy from a female akum? The Gemara answers, Kevin demigriba mirasasa. So the Gemara answers because since the animal will become familiar with her, he'll start running after her all over the place. And the neighbors are going to see, and all of the people who are her customers are going to see, hey, why is this goat running after you all over the place? Is this your boyfriend or something? And so she's going to be embarrassed. And because of that embarrassment, she won't commit acts of bestiality with animals that she wants to sell to customers, because the customers are going to look at her like she's nuts when they see this goat running after her all over the place. So Elahada Tani Rav Yosef Armalta Lotarbi Kalba Velotishri Barbe Rav Bushpiza. But wait a minute, let's scrutinize that based on the following brisa. So the brisa says that an almana, a Jewish widow, is not allowed to have a dog, which is a very interesting halacha. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch also. You have to be careful about this. I guess if the animal is neutered, it's not a problem. But an almana, what?
Yeah, if it's or it's little.
It doesn't matter. An almana is not allowed to have a dog, nor is she allowed to have an inn where she hosts Talmidei Chachamim. So the Gemara now says, Bishlama bar Rav Tzaniela. I can understand why she's not allowed to host Talmidei Chachamim, because maybe one will seduce the other, and she's not worried about being intimate with him, because she knows that since he's a Talmud Chacham, he's got his own reputation to worry about, so he won't brag to his friend about the almana that he was with. So therefore, that's why we're concerned that maybe they will do something, and therefore he has to stay away. Ela kalba kevin demigraba mirasisa. But why can't she have a dog? If you just told me that a woman is embarrassed to have an animal chasing after her after she's intimate with the animal, then why don't we say the same thing? Let her have a dog. She's not going to be intimate with the dog because people are going to see her. The dog's going to be trying to attack her all the time. So the Gemara answers, "Kevin dechishaji leumtzu masrich habasra meimer amri inshi hai meimer amri inshi hai demasrich habasra mishum umtzu dekamasrich." So the Gemara answers because dogs are different from other animals. Dogs are very affectionate animals because anytime you throw them a bone, they want to run after you and they even want to, hump your leg or whatever. So the thing is that if people see that the dog is overly affectionate with her, they're not going to jump to the conclusion that it's because it's her boyfriend, but rather it's because she feeds the dog. And that's why the dog is so affectionate. So that's why dogs are more problematic than other animals. But when it comes to a female shepherd, if the animal is overly affectionate, people are going to start talking, and therefore we assume she's not going to do that.
Rabbi, I don't understand the logic about the rabbinical student. It should be just the opposite. In other words, why would it be forbidden if the rabbinical student will want to protect his reputation, then it should be permitted that they could have...
No. So here's the logic. A rabbinical student has the same Yetzer Hara as everybody else. She will demur the advances of another man because she's worried that it'll mar her reputation as a proper upstanding Jewess. Because he'll go ahead after he beds her and go to the tavern and talk to his buddies about that almana, right? A rabbinical student is very quiet and has his own reputation at stake. So he may commit the same avera, but he just won't talk about it. And so she knows that her secret is safe when it comes to rabbinical student. You got it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Chacham doesn't go to the bars,
right.
taverns.
That's right.
He's on the base of measures.
That's right.
They won't talk, so they're more
So-
likely to something could happen because nobody's going to know.
No one will know. Her
Well,
secret is
she
safe.
doesn't,
Okay.
Which is all the more reason why she should probably look at it, because they're going to be keeping it secret.
That's the point.
Yeah, that's the reason. That's okay. You got it now. Okay, so now the Gemara says, "Nekevos eitzel nekevos my time alomi achadinan." So now the question is, okay, you've explained everything up until now, but why can't I let my female animal
female person.
stay with or be under the tutelage of a female akum shepherd? What's the possible? There's no bestiality that one a female human can commit with a female animal. So what's the problem? So the Gemara answers, Omar Mar Ukva Bar Chamim Bipnei Shaovdei Kochav Mitzuyin Eitzel Neshei Chavreyon Upamim Sheino Motza Motza Yasa Behema Verova. The answer is because female shepherds have boyfriends, even though they're not their husbands. This woman could say she's married to someone else or whatever, but there's so much lewdness, licentiousness that's committed in the Akum community. Any man who says he wants to be her boyfriend, she'll welcome, and so he'll come, her paramour, and one day he won't find her. She's out in the field, but he goes into the barn and he finds an animal. It turns out to be the Jew's goat, so he'll commit bestiality with the Jew's goat, and that's what you have to worry about. So not from the female shepherd, but from the female shepherd's boyfriend. The boy zema afilu motza anami rova, da amar mar chaviv alein behemten shel Yisrael yoser min shosehen. That some say that it's not that only if they can't find the woman that they'll commit the act with the animal, but they'll prefer to commit the act with the Jewish animal over the non-Jewish woman. Why is that? Why is that?
So it doesn't know why.
Tosfos says, I don't know why. Yeah. Lo no delari mehechanaf ke'ikr davar zeh. So anyway, the Gemara suggests the explanation. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan b'shah sheba nachash al chava hitul bazuhama, is that when the Nachash bedded Chava, this was part of the original sin, he injected within her a corruptive venom that caused women to have a certain corruptive force within them that animals do not possess. And therefore, according to this opinion, an akum may be more attracted to a Jewish animal who has that sense of innocence more than his human girlfriend who has that sense of tumah within her, the sense of defilement within her. And Ihachi Yisrael Nami. If so, then say the same thing, that Jewish women have that same corruptive force within them, and we don't find that. So the Gemara answers, Yisrael sha'amdu al har Sinai paska zu amasan, ovdei kochavim shelo amdu al har Sinai lo paska zu amasan. The answer is that the Jews stood at Har Sinai, including future Gerim, Tosfos says, and all of their corruptive forces, both in the males and the females, were completely eliminated. And that corruptive force was never reintroduced. And therefore, Jewish women have a certain comeliness that, including the animals of Jews, that does not exist by akum humans or akum animals. Ibayalahu, ofosmai. Let's go on to the next fascinating question, which I'm sure you're interested in. Can you let your bird be in the possession of a akum shepherd? You have to worry about bestiality with a bird. So, you'll love this. Tashma, da'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabbi Chanina, ani ra'isi obe kochavim shalakach avaz min hashok, rava chanukah tzala va'achla. I once saw an akum purchase a goose from the marketplace. He gratified himself sexually with it, then he strangled it and roasted it and ate it. Wow, how much fun can you have with one goose? Va'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah midifti. So that sort of answers the question that they are suspect of bestiality for birds as well. Va'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah midifti ani ra'isi aravi achad shalakach yerach min hashok v'chakak ba kedei ravia rava tzala va'achla. I once saw an Arab buy the thigh of, let's say, a cow, cut a groove into it, gratified himself sexually in that groove, and then roasted the meat and ate it. So in other words, we're talking about really debased behavior. Anyway, so therefore it comes to show you that there is a suspicion, right? I guess you shouldn't, that's another reason why you can't let a goy be a mashkiach on the meat. You have to have, it's got to be completely sealed. So Ravina Amar lo kasha. Now Ravina comes along and says, let's go back to our original question. The original question was that the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to let your animals be under the tutelage of an akum shepherd lest they come to commit bestiality. Why then does the Brisa say that you're permitted to purchase an animal from an akum without worrying that it has been criminalized for the purposes of korbanos? Why is one forbidden and one is permitted? So Ravina says, I have another answer. I'll tell you another answer, not because one's the animal of a Jew, one's the animal of the akum, but rather because halichatchila hadievid. It's just a question of lichatchila and b'di'evid. In other words, lichatchila, we should be choshesh that if you have an animal, don't commit the potential violation of lifnei iver l'sitein michshel by giving it to an akum who might potentially, commit a crime with that animal. But if it's already in the possession of an akum and you need an animal, you don't have to worry b'di'evid post facto that it's already in his possession that he's committed bestiality with it. So uminat temer deshani ben lechatchila ben l'di'evid, and how do you know that such a differentiation even exists? Ditznan lo sisyached isha imam mipnei shechashudin al ha'arayos, because the Mishnah says that a woman is not allowed to have yichud. We just learned this. She can't have yichud with an akum because they're suspect of sexual crime. So mipnei shechashudin al ha'arayos or a minu. But let's raise a contradiction. Ha'isha shenech b'sha b'dei oivdei kochavim ayidei mamun muteres l'bayla ayidei nefashos asur l'bayla. But there's another Mishnah that says that if a woman is kidnapped or imprisoned by an akum, then she's freed, is she permitted to her husband?
Yes.
So it depends. If she was being held for ransom, so then they will not violate the woman, and she's therefore permitted to her husband, even if he's a kohen. But if she was condemned already, she was on death row, and they have nothing to gain by keeping her pure, then you have to assume that she was violated in some way, and she's therefore usher to her husband. So elalav shma mina shani lon bein lechatchila l'di'evid. So you see very clearly the fact that even though she had yichud with an akum, you can assume under certain circumstances that she's still tahor, she has not been violated. You see that there's a difference. Lichatchila don't have yichud with them, but b'di'evid, if you did, you don't have to assume the worst. So that's the difference. The Gemara is going to continue that line of reasoning in Mirz Hashem in the daf tomorrow.